Okay, so let's just dive right into this. Picture this scenario for a second. It's a Saturday afternoon. Your friends are out somewhere loud, maybe a crowded rooftop bar or some group hangout where half the conversation is really just yelling over the background music. But you're sitting somewhere completely quiet. Maybe it's a cozy corner of your apartment, a park bench, or honestly, just chilling in your parked car, doing absolutely nothing but thinking and letting your mind wander at its own pace.
And then, right in the middle of all that peace, this tiny little voice creeps in, asking, wait, should I feel bad about this? Well, I am here to tell you today that this internal voice of guilt is absolutely not yours. It was planted there by a society that constantly and completely falsely equates constant socializing with normal happiness. We are just bombarded with the idea that doing things in groups is the default setting for humans, and that solitude, well, that's just something you resort to when you don't have any better options.
But here's the thing. There is a massive disconnect between what we're told and what's actually happening inside your brain. We have this super pervasive societal myth that isolation automatically means you're sad or broken or antisocial. But the actual psychological reality? Solitude is evidence of high-level cognitive functioning. It's time we completely reframe solitude. It is not a personality flaw. It's actually a clear, strong signal that your brain is operating on a completely different, honestly kind of supercharged level.
So what does this actually look like in everyday life? Well, there are 6 specific solitary habits that basically act as the main features of this highly unique neurological operating system. If you find yourself doing these things alone, entirely on purpose, and without anyone asking you to, let's take a look at how your mind is really working behind the scenes.
All right, first up, you think problems through alone. When a challenge pops up, most people's very first instinct is to immediately text a friend or, pull a group chat. They're effectively outsourcing their cognitive discomfort to 5 other people, but not you. You sit with it. You roll the problem around in your own head. By doing this, you're building an internal locus of control. Basically, you're actively developing the rock-solid belief that your own reasoning is actually worth trusting. You're practicing thinking without a safety net, and over time, that leads to vastly better decision-making.
Moving on to our second habit, and this one is crucial: processing your emotions quietly and alone. Now, you aren't emotionally shutting down here. You are actually doing the hard work. This leads to what psychologists call emotional granularity. You aren't just broadly labeling a feeling as bad or upset. No, you are identifying the exact specific texture of your emotion. And research shows this high level of emotional specificity is directly linked to much better emotional regulation and overall mental health. You're simply willing to sit still long enough to actually feel things clearly.
Okay, habit 3 is all about practicing solo rituals that nobody else even knows about. Maybe it's a very specific route you walk or a playlist you only ever listen to by yourself. This isn't just some quirky little habit, it's called self-authorship. You are actively constructing your own inner world rather than just sitting around waiting for the external world to hand you one. While a lot of people need constant external noise just to feel grounded, you are out there generating your very own internal signal.
Now, habit number 4 highlights something that is honestly incredibly rare today: making big decisions without needing a consensus. Humans have this ancient, deeply wired instinct to conform, right? Especially when we face uncertainty. But you possess intellectual independence. You have the uncanny ability to distinguish between external input as mere data and other people's opinions as an instruction manual. Sure, you'll gather perspectives, but when it's time to actually make the call, you retreat to the quiet and make that decision entirely on your own.
Which leads right into habit 5. You genuinely enjoy your own company. You weren't just tolerating being alone. The quiet actually feels completely full to you, not empty. Psychologists call this self-companionship. You've gotten totally comfortable with your own thoughts, your own rhythm, and your own unique sense of humor, even if you are literally the only person in the room laughing. And what's amazing here is that psychologists note this specific ability to feel whole while alone is one of the absolute strongest predictors of long-term psychological well-being.
And finally, habit number 6, you reflect on your own behavior completely unprompted. Maybe you're lying in bed, replaying a conversation, and asking yourself why you reacted a certain way. This right here is the absolute hallmark of a post-conventional mind. Most people, they only reflect when a crisis forces them to, or when somebody else calls them out. By reflecting preemptively and quietly on your own time, you prove that your moral and cognitive compass is genuinely internal. It marks a fundamentally deeper relationship with yourself.
So, zooming out a bit and looking at the big picture, all of this points to what we can call the background operating system.
For minds like yours, reflection isn't just some chore you schedule on a calendar. It's running constantly in the background. You are continuously reviewing information, connecting the dots, and turning raw, everyday experiences into profound wisdom while everyone else has simply moved on to the next distraction.
And there is some absolutely fascinating neuroscience backing all of this up. When you are just staring out a window doing absolutely nothing, your brain's default mode network lights up like a Christmas tree because society exclusively rewards visible productivity. We just falsely assume that sitting quietly isn't doing any work. But this network proves that when external demands decrease, your brain actually becomes far more creative and integrative. Doing nothing is actually when your major mental breakthroughs begin to happen.
There's this really powerful idea in psychology. First comes stillness, then comes insight. Take a second to really let that sink in. In our modern world, a world absolutely obsessed with constant stimulation, where literally everyone reaches for their phone the exact millisecond they feel a hint of boredom, finding true stillness is the required non-negotiable first step to unlocking deep internal clarity.
And that right there is exactly why carving out this solitude matters so much. When you are constantly surrounded by the noise of other people, it becomes incredibly difficult to know which thoughts are genuinely yours. Solitude separates the signal from the noise. It moves you away from all those exhausting borrowed thoughts. Things like, what will people say, or what's expected of me, and gives you the space to finally uncover your own voice. It allows you to ask, what do I actually value?
Eventually, if you hang out in that quiet space long enough, the most important question of all surfaces. What do I think? Not what your friends think, not what your coworkers think, not what society expects, but what do you think? It is a pivotal, completely liberating moment when you stop conforming to external expectations and start asking this single, profound question.
And honestly, that question changes everything. Answering it brings just an incredible level of clarity to your life. You stop making decisions just to impress other people. You stop chasing goals you never truly wanted in the first place. And with that clarity comes a massive psychological advantage. A person who truly understands themselves is fundamentally harder to manipulate, harder to pressure, and their decisions become infinitely easier to navigate.
Now this brings us to a really common misconception known as the solitude paradox. Being comfortable alone does not disconnect you from humanity. It just changes how you connect. Relying merely on physical proximity focuses entirely on quantity and visibility, which ironically often results in feeling completely isolated even in a crowded room. But focusing on understanding prioritizes quality and genuine attention. It results in deep, meaningful connection. You essentially stop chasing follower counts and start valuing true intimacy.
To make this even clearer, we really have to separate loneliness from solitude. They are entirely different states of being. Loneliness is that painful experience of being disconnected from others, constantly seeking external validation just to feel okay. Solitude, on the other hand, finding peace in what others might view as emptiness, is about being deeply connected to yourself. It's about generating your own internal meaning. It is a restorative peace, guys, not a punishment.
Oh, and there is a total hidden superpower in all of this too. Solitude creates master observers. Because you spend so much time thoroughly examining your own inner world, you become unusually skilled at recognizing the hidden motivations and the unspoken truths of others. You notice the subtle patterns, you notice the contradictions. You actually become way better at deeply connecting with people because you've developed the incredibly rare skill of paying genuine attention.
And this deep connection to yourself completely flips what you value. Society is constantly pushing self-esteem, which heavily depends on external outcomes. Success, praise, the applause of the crowd. But solitude? Solitude builds self-respect, and that grows quietly in private. It comes from keeping promises to yourself, practicing radical honesty, and truly knowing who you are when the performance finally ends and nobody is watching.
Another really profound lesson solitude teaches you is that emotions are completely temporary. When you can sit with yourself long enough to watch entire emotional storms roll in and then pass, you realize that difficult feelings simply do not last. This builds up this quiet, steady resilience against the totally unpredictable nature of life. People who enjoy solitude are often far less frightened by uncertainty, simply because they've already survived it internally over and over again.
So what's the big takeaway from all this? Thinking independently, processing honestly, deciding confidently, enjoying your own company, reflecting deeply. All of these solitary habits point to one underlying, incredibly powerful and increasingly rare capacity: deep, earned self-trust. By engaging in these habits, you are building a psychological foundation that simply does not shatter under pressure.
I want to leave you with one final powerful question today. When the world finally goes quiet, when the phone notifications stop and the expectations of everybody else just fade into the background, who is the person left in the room with you? Building a healthy, honest relationship with that person in the silence isn't isolation. It is, without a doubt, your greatest psychological strength. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and hey, I really hope you find some time to truly enjoy your own company today.